we're going to talk about geometric transformations. So geometric transformations, it just means the different ways that you can move a shape on a coordinate plane. So there are two types of transformations. There are what we call rigid motions or rigid transformations, and then there are non-rigid motions or non-rigid transformations. We're going to start with talking about rigid. So when you think about that word rigid, it really kind of makes you think about something that doesn't move, it's very firm, it doesn't budge. So if you think about something being rigid and you apply that to a shape, that means that your shape doesn't change in size. So anytime there's a rigid motion, that means you can move it to the left, you can move it right, you can move it up or down. So it's changing location, but it's not changing in size. Now, another way of saying that something doesn't change in size is to say that it preserves congruence. So there are three different rigid transformations. The first is called a translation. So a translation is just moving the object up, down, left, or right. So I can take the square and I can move it down, up, right, or left, and it does not change its size. The next type of rigid transformation is called a reflection. A reflection just means that the object has been flipped. And the final type of rigid transformation is called a rotation. A rotation simply spins the shape around a certain point. The second type of geometric transformation is called non-rigid, and just like if rigid preserves congruence or keeps the object the same size, non-rigid is the opposite of that. It does not preserve congruence and it does not keep the object the same size. So for this shape that I have on my screen, if I were to make it larger or make it smaller, it still has the same general shape. It's just either bigger or it's smaller. That's what we call a non-rigid motion. So a non-rigid motion does not preserve congruence. But it does preserve proportion. And there's only one type of non-rigid transformation, and it simply is what you just saw happen. If the figure gets larger or if it gets smaller, that's called a dilation.